Thank you very much for this opportunity once again. My name is Amadu Massally, and I'm from Sierra Leone. As Sister Eureka mentioned earlier, I used to work in the corporate world until I found my passion, which is to reconnect my native Sierra Leone to African Americans and others that have ancestry there. In our work, we have been able to see that historians have shown Sierra Leone has one of the strongest of connections to African Americans. But people generally don't know this. And part of what we do is to popularize these stories, our stories. I want to start off with a place called Bonds Island in Freetown, Sierra Leone, or in the Sierra Leone River. It was a slave castle. And from, in our view, we think is the single most important historic site for African Americans outside of America. Historians have called this place a place where history sleeps. From this little island in Sierra Leone, tens of thousands of Africans were forcefully taken to a small place in America, South Carolina, and 60 years later, Georgia. Specifically, there are other states, but other colonies, but these were the two main ones. Based on these history and these connections, there have been major visits between Sierra Leoneans and African Americans who are known as Gullahs that live off the coast of South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, somewhat, and North Carolina. So, a Sierra Leonean president in 1988 visited South Carolina based on these connections. It was, I think, still the first president to ever visit South Carolina based on familial or historical connections. While he was there, he invited a group of Gullahs that went to Sierra Leone in 1989. There were leaders from South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, and also Oklahoma, where you have the Black Seminoles, who are Gullah origins, Africans who became Gullahs, and some of them were from Sierra Leone. Now, 8 years later, in 1997, on the story of a song known to be the longest text in an African language that has been preserved and handed down through generations by an African American family of slavery origin, the Morans. They live in Harris Lake, Georgia, many of them. In 2005, it was Priscilla's turn to visit. This is a remarkable story, and it was another national event in our country. It deals with a 10-year-old girl that was taken from Bonds Island, I just mentioned, to Charleston, South Carolina in 1756. This story was made known to us in the 2000s, 2005. Priscilla went home, like I said, but it came to us through the seventh generation descendant of a plantation owner in Charleston, South Carolina, wrote a book called Slaves in the Family. And whilst he was doing that, he was able to pinpoint this 10-year-old girl all the way down to a man called Mr. Martin in Charleston, South Carolina, whose daughter, Tomalyn Polite, went to Sierra Leone in 2005. Fast forward to 2019, the most recent homecoming by Gullahs to Sierra Leone was done by us, our organization, FambulTik. See, the first three visits to Sierra Leone were done by government, United States government, and Sierra Leone government. But this fourth and most recent one was done by ordinary people, Sierra Leoneans and Gullahs. So it was special in that regard. It is the largest group to go on a historical study tour to Sierra Leone, and the experiences were vivid. Now, 30 years ago, Sierra Leone was unknown in this place, in this space of African American or diaspora connections. But now, Sierra Leone, the country, is getting attention from African American heritage seekers like we've never seen before. We even have root stories going on their own to Sierra Leone. And these developments will continue. It is an ongoing phenomenon that has legs, not going away in a hurry. And all of these things that are happening today, if you look at the DNA Sierra Leoneans, we call them Sierra Leonean Americans. If you ask probably Dr. Gina Page with African ancestry, many results come back and point to Sierra Leone, which is a small country. Today we're only about 7 million people. That back then we were even a lot more smaller. But how did all of this happen that many DNA African Americans who took to take their DNA test point to Sierra Leone? There's a reason behind that, and the history, which I've spoke to briefly, supports that. You will probably want to wonder, well, what has happened since all of these things, all of these revelations in terms of our historical connections? Now, you may have heard of a place called the Gullah-Geechees corridor here in America. It's a federal, a U.S. federal agency that deals with an area in America that was designated for these Gullah-Geechees people. It starts from Florida, it goes through Georgia, through South Carolina, and ends in North Carolina. The reason I brought up the Gullah-Geechees corridor, because as Henry Campbell said in our film, Gullah Roots, this whole thing was inspired by their trip to Sierra Leone, the Gullah-Geechees corridor itself, because they went to Congressman Claiborne to ask him for a small site on St. Helena Island to do Gullah stuff. But Claiborne decided that no, we're going to ask for a whole corridor. I'm trying to impersonate his way of talking here. Now, also in 2006, Sierra Leoneans in America started going to Gullah festivals. So we go down to South Carolina and visit with Gullahs and share their history, or learn their history, whilst we share ours. We've had performances down there. We've been there many times now. There's a museum called the International African American Museum being built in Charleston, and it will feature these stories I just mentioned. And also, they have asked for a monument from Sierra Leone to be displayed at the museum. I mentioned earlier about DNA Sierra Leoneans that show a lot of high numbers pointing to Sierra Leone, to the point where African Ancestry now has a program to Sierra Leone. So other than just giving them DNA, African Americans' DNA results, they are now thinking, in fact, they've started planning historical tours to Sierra Leone, because it makes sense. Also, another thing that has happened every year, or every change of ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Sierra Leone, when they present their credentials, they would write in their letter the connections between the Gullah-Geechees of America and Sierra Leoneans. To us, that's big. Now, in the future, we think diaspora tourism with a sense of purpose is the way to go. And this is where academia comes into play, because through colleges, through even high schools, we can do study abroad program, historical study tours, and get our stories back to our people in our own narratives. That's important. So our organization, FambulTik, has been doing this type of work. And recently we started innovating with doing virtual tours as a substitute to physical tours, given the COVID-19 era, for example. And we would like to do more of these with academia. Last year, Agnes Scott College was the first, I think it was earlier this year, was the first college in America that did a virtual tour with our company, with our organization, FambulTik, and we had a fantastic time. We know that this can be done by many others, not just Sierra Leone. I mean, there are other African countries that have similar things that I've just shared, but I can only speak to Sierra Leone stuff because that's what I've been working on. We've been working on. So, and I see diaspora tourism as a form of higher education. It's not just about doing the tours themselves and doing people-to-people contact, but roots tourism generates material. From our recent study tour, for example, we have a survey, and I'll share the link to the results in the chats later. But we collected data that have never been gathered in Sierra Leone with respect to heritage tourism and the satisfaction gained by our sojourners, 54 of them, that followed us into Sierra Leone in 2019. We even created a scorecard, how we can measure heritage tourist experiences, an innovative way of heritage tourist satisfaction along 4 pillars, which I will talk about later. So in a nutshell, as the previous speaker before us said, this is how we tell our stories. This is what we need to do more of as Africans in the diaspora, as Africans on the continent. We need to be taking these practical steps beyond the theory.